Welcome to episode 152 of the Daniel Yoris podcast with today's guest, John Martirosyan. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Another joint broadcast between me and JMart. John, thanks for joining me, buddy.
I'm happy to be here and appreciate you always taking me up on the offer to do these. Thank you.
Of course. No, it's been a good back and forth journey with the chats that we've had on the podcast over the past couple of years, and just thinking about how fast time has flown by is just chatting quickly before this is crazy, but it's always good to reconnect. And now that we're on this kind of New Year's goal train of kind of maybe, this will just be a perpetual thing year after year, and who knows, but it's nice to just kind of reconnect, and I think nice for people listening to sort of be able to follow along this journey and gain insights as well.
Totally. I mean, everyone does New Year's resolutions, big or small. Some years we take it off, some years we get inspired to do it again. Maybe someone's going to listen to this conversation and think it's not too late to start something this year.
That's right. And at least this year, we're getting it done in January. I think last year we did this, it was like March or April by the time we connected and kind of had it set. But anyways, just to quickly recap then, what were the goals? And the format of this podcast will be like, we'll kind of go back and forth, kind of asking each other the same questions and talking about our own separate experiences. But what were the goals you had set for last year, and what was the result of your resolutions for last year?
Yeah, so I had a running-based goal. I picked the Toronto Waterfront Marathon, which was on October 15th. I wanted to run that marathon, half marathon, so only 21.1 kilometers, and I wanted to do it with a goal of doing it in under 2 hours without incurring any injury. Very specific about those parameters. And then I ended up training for it for about 7 months leading up to it, did the race, and was luckily prepared enough to finish 1 hour, 54 minutes. So 6 minutes shy of, or like below the threshold that I set for myself, and no injury to report. So pretty happy with the result. And yeah, happy to discuss all the details if any questions that you have.
Yeah, and congratulations on that. I mean, it's phenomenal just to set a goal and hit it. Like you said, luckily you hit it, but I don't know how much luck played a role more so or as much as your just, intelligent training and perseverance to push through it. And it wasn't without its own difficulties as well. I want to talk a little bit about kind of what worked and what went well for you, but where can you did a much more in-depth breakdown of this that we're not going to go into that much detail, but where can people find that? On
totally. Any podcatcher people use for finding podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, just search State of Health. It's the most recent episode of State of Health. You can also go to my Substack, jmartfit.substack.com. You'll find everything there.
Perfect. So what were some of the big things that you felt helped prepare you for actually hitting your goal? Like maybe that's a huge question that's not nearly specific enough, but maybe let me put it this way. What actually helped you stick to your goal and see it through?
Well, I had a big why. I think we talked about this last time. I was highly motivated to do this, even though I don't have a particular love of running. But I was doing it because I wanted to get better at jiu-jitsu, because I wanted to have really good endurance and for when I was on the mats playing that game. And I decided that cross-training was going to be the best way to approach that. And it would be beneficial for many reasons, partially also because it would be like giving my body a different way of moving so that it would not perpetuate some of the repetitive movement from doing jiu-jitsu. But ultimately, because I was so committed to that, I think that's why I made sure that I had at least 1 day per week during my run, during my training period, to ensure that I was doing a real training run, not just like a half-assed one where I wasn't really, thinking about, like you could be on a treadmill watching TV. I feel like that's not really training. I was very intentional with everything that I was doing during my training period. And that's what I averaged 1 run per week leading up to the race. Which
is interesting to hear because that doesn't sound like a whole lot. if you think someone's training for a half marathon or a marathon, you might think they're running, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times a week. Like, seems like about what maybe someone should be doing, but it's probably not necessary unless maybe if you're competing at a, highly competitive level, sure. But for most people who are just trying to hit under a certain time or just to complete it, it's probably not necessary to be training much more than once a week on the actual running aspect of it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this last time, but I think because of my training history, I'm someone with a decent level of cardiovascular fitness to start out with. Mm-hmm. So really what the thing for me is to be able to catch up my tissue integrity to be as good as my cardiovascular fitness was. And that improved also, but it was just the fact that there's a gap between them, and it actually takes a lot longer for like your muscles or the tendons and ligaments and all those things to catch up to be as good as everything else, whether it be muscle strength or your cardiovascular fitness, how good your heart's pumping and everything. So, because I guess I was just trying to focus on really not injuring myself. And I had some constraints with my schedule. I've got 2 kids, and then I was also still more committed to actually doing jiu-jitsu than running. I think I averaged 2 jiu-jitsu sessions per week and 1 running session. So I was still doing other stuff in addition to the running. Not a lot of weight training. There was weight training in the beginning, again, to really address the tendons and tissues and joints specifically. But once the running season began and I could get outside more, then that's kind of what I focused on.
I think that's also, it's always hard to extrapolate one specific methods of doing things to other people because you have such a great training history. And so for someone else who's like untrained or has a very low training age, like they probably couldn't get away with only one phase of actually doing the strength training. It might take the entirety of the year for their joints and tissues just to become robust enough to even complete the run, whereas you can get away with only doing some very targeted strength training for a very short period of time relatively, and then you're still training and moving and doing all the things all the time. It's just not as targeted, where I think that probably wouldn't work out that well for the average person.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't discount the level of adaptation you get even from one run per week, because ultimately, I feel like that could even be in a really kind of Goldilocks frequency where even if your technique of how you're running, or maybe even sometimes you're off with the intensity where you're like pushing it too much, but because you're giving yourself so much time to recover, that's the beauty of the human body and of being like an alive being, is that you're training your body to be more resilient than next time you're doing something. So it's possible that even if your technique sucks and you're doing it kind of things are a little off, but because you're giving yourself enough time to recover, you're coming back stronger and you're able to handle that extra like force or whatever you're causing on yourself, that extra fatigue.
Yeah, I think maybe the way to sum that up for anyone, and this would apply to everyone, is like more is not always better. More training is not better. Like better training is better. And so if you're going to spend your effort, spend it on training effectively and efficiently and safely being without incurring an injury, rather than just like, oh, well, I've got to do more because I should do more. Like you might benefit from actually just doing less if it's better.
Maybe what I would even add to that, like better is good, but like really mindful, because you could be doing a bad set of squats, whatever, something you're training. It could be that you're performing it bad, but if you're mindful and you can feel the impact it's having on you, you can choose to stop before you pass a threshold. And I think that's the really key thing that's lacking in most people I train with, is that they have no ability to tell what the impact of what they're doing is having on their body. But I don't know if it takes time or practice or just being able to tune things out, but you should be able to feel what's happening and respond, precisely to that. And that could be the key thing that saves you from, just doing something that feels like, oh, sore the next day, which maybe that's good, because then, like I said, you're going to rebuild regrow to be stronger, or you pass that threshold where it's acute. It's not a chronic thing. It's acute, and there's like actual tear or something like that. Like a little inflammation is going to be fine, but if there's a physical tear, then that's completely different.
It's definitely underappreciated how difficult that is to achieve, and I think it takes both time and a conscious effort to become conscious of what you're doing, and probably even some level of coaching or guidance or mentorship or whatever you want to call it, for someone to direct your thoughts and attention as to what's going on. And even on a very basic level, like most people, and this is no fault of their own, they've just not been educated or taught in this, but it's like they miss what they're doing, or the point of what they're doing. So like the point of doing 3 sets of 10 squats is not to do 30 squats. The point is to like improve your leg strength. So if those 3 sets of 10 squats are with very poor form, or with negligible intensity, or whatever, something else is wrong, it doesn't matter that you completed them. Like, you're not checking a box. You're trying to create adaptation in your body. And if you're not doing the things to create adaptation, or you're creating a poor adaptation, then you're actually getting further away from your goal. And that sounds really simple, I think, to say, but to actually feel that and to be able to like understand it while it's happening, and feel it while it's happening, and to be able to adapt on the fly, like that, I think takes a long time.
But ultimately, that's what people do. Like I was listening to our podcast from last time, and we were talking about how when, you get injured, you can use pain as a guide for what to do. You kind of move around the pain and things like that. And you had a little bit of caution as you're telling people to do that. But I think like ultimately someone had to do that, to figure it out, to teach somebody else. Nobody just like, somebody had to fool around and see what does it feel like if I move my body this way while I have this pain, and keep moving and finding out what it feels like, and then be able to communicate that to somebody else, and then through dialogue figure out what's true, what's not. So I think I want to empower people to move as much as possible, move around pain, move through pain, use it as a teacher, and use any sensation that you get from movement as a way to learn more about yourself and more about your body, and what impacts you're able to take on and learn from.
I like that. I think maybe my message now more is to be patient with it. Like it's doable. It's not easy. It's doable, and it may take longer. You may need to try 7 different iterations of your squat. Change your angle, change your foot angle, change your width, whatever it is. Change a bunch of different little things, and then see what's working. And if you're patient enough, like you will figure it out eventually.
Yeah. And I think last time you were just very much proposing that people find an expert to help guide them through that, which is absolutely true as well. But just ultimately knowing that you're the only person who can feel what's happening inside you, and you're the best for like making that assessment. Just keep that in mind. And it's always great to find somebody who can help you along the path. But ultimately you have to be the one there feeling what's happening.
Absolutely. You can only control yourself, and that's that. So thinking back to some of your journey from last year, what will you do differently this year?
Yeah, totally. So a couple things. So it's going to be quite a big jump from half marathon to a full marathon. It's what I was doing during the half marathon in terms of hydration is going to have to definitely change. So one thing that I mentioned in the full write-up is I hate the feeling of water sloshing around inside of me when I'm running, and I always get it if I like drink mid-run. I don't know what to do about it, so I decided I would just not drink any water while I ran. And for 2 hours, I feel like that's manageable. And the way I would like kind of try to control it so that I didn't feel really thirsty and it didn't bother me and hinder me in any way was I would take like a tablespoon of honey, drop a big pinch of salt on it, just eat that, and then down a big glass of water afterwards. And then that seemed to work. Honestly, for 2 hours, you can run not feeling thirsty and just feel pretty energetic. That's what I did during my training, and I repeated that experience for the actual run as well, just so that like the conditions were the same for how I trained and how I raced. That's not going to be possible, I think, for the full marathon. If I'm going to double the distance and hoping to hit a 4-hour mark this time for that double the distance. It's like, no, I'm going to have to do something. And a friend of mine suggested that there's these like powders that you can get that you mix with water that give you a mix of salts and sugars. And so I'm going to have to just get used to the feeling of it sloshing around, or maybe figure out if there's like small amounts that I can drink throughout the various points in the run to, there's going to have to be some experimenting to figure out what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. I think you can so I've used some of these electrolyte packs and whatnot, and I think they're fine. They're great. And, I've heard of some people kind of like dry shooting them. You just like with a mouthful of water in the full packet. I mean, the taste would be very potent, but like you're not trying to have a delicious drink while you're running a marathon. You're just trying to get it in you. So like that seems like it's possible because it's a mouthful of water versus like a big glass of water. But I have not tested it, so I don't know, and I probably will not be testing it. But I mean, yeah, those things are definitely options. Do they have those gel packs? I know that they had those for like energy, but I can't imagine, like, why wouldn't they just put salt and electrolytes in it now? So, is that a thing that exists for marathons?
I'm going to have to do some exploration into this world, because like I had a very simple solution this first time around. Just don't mess with it. And I'll still have the same solution that I apply, and like, so that for the first at least hour or so of the run, I should be probably fine. And then after that, play around with what I can do to make sure I kind of maintain that hydration level for the rest of the run. But I'm sure stuff exists. I have a friend who actually ran that same run with me, but she ran the full marathon, and it was amazing because she ran twice the distance that I did at a faster pace, and she qualified for the Boston Marathon. So wow. I have someone that I can look up to for some advice based on that.
There you go. When are you planning to do the full marathon? Because you did the last one in October, so it will be the same time of year-ish?
I think I'm going to go for the same race because it's a fun little race along the lakeshore. I think it's in October, and it gives me the time to train all through spring and summer and the early fall, because it's such a long race. And that's part of like going back to your like surprise that only one run per week, but I did that over 7 months.
Yeah.
Over 7 months, you're going to be able to get to 21 kilometers. And I did it in a very like methodical way, where every time I increased my distance, I would take at least 1 or 2 runs where I would go less than what that new kind of like total distance that I got up to. And then I called it like my, what did I call it? Now the word's escaping me. Sorry. Consolidation run, the consolidation. So I would consolidate like the new distance by doing shorter runs before attempting a new like long distance. And then just doing that, you can get to 21 kilometers in no time. Because I think overall I had something like over 20 weeks, like nearly 30 weeks. So it's like,
yeah. I think it was 22 runs you mentioned that you had. Which when you say it like that, like when you say it over 20 weeks, it sounds like a lot, but when it's only 20 runs, it doesn't sound like that much. It's 20 chances to like improve, right? 20 sets of squats, not really, but like 20 sets really. So it's interesting to map it out and just, realize how much you can improve with a methodical approach. But the reason that I asked about the timing is, 1, how much time do you have to prepare? But 2, the conditions will be more or less the same. It's not like you're going to do it in the end of July when it's going to be really hot, and hydration and sweat and these things would be more of a consideration than they would be in October. So that will be nice for your preparation as well, understanding what the conditions roughly will be like.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about this Toronto waterfront run is the time of year. It's a great time to run. Even like I was worried that it was going to be bad weather that day. It wasn't great, but because you're running, it was actually perfect. So I wouldn't want to sign up for anything in July or August. That would be hell.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare. I mean, you can get some pretty random hot days in October as well, but it's probably preferable for it to be a little cooler, because then your body's keeping you warm, but you're not dripping sweat. Even if it's like a little cold to be standing outside, it's nice to be running. So reminds me of like elementary school cross country days.
Yeah, I almost kept leggings on, but I'm so glad I took them off for the race, because I would have been way too hot in them.
Yeah. What did you do through your prep that you thought didn't work out so well, if there was anything, and that you would have removed or completely altered, if there's anything at all?
What do I think didn't work out? That's a good question, because we always focus on the things that do work. It's always good to point out things that also, we can just put aside. I'm not sure. I'll think about that as we continue the conversation, but generally speaking, it was a pretty simple approach. Like we talked about it last time, it was like that typical kind of get the general preparedness going, then focus on volume and then intensity. So like that aspect of it like worked out fine, and I wouldn't change anything about that. Like, I mean, the general approach, like we talked, the general approach always works, and then the specifics are different. So I guess specifically, one thing in the plan was that I would try to build a running routine that involved multiple runs per week. And then just with my time constraints, I came to realize that I could only commit for sure one run per week. And then, the question really messed me up.
No worries. Honestly, it doesn't, from your recap and from the results that you had, it doesn't sound like there was a ton that went wrong. So looking for something that went wrong, where there wasn't like an obvious, hey, I made this mistake, I wasted time doing this training or this type of thing. Like, it doesn't sound like there was a lot of wasted time or inefficiency in your whole prep. I mean, I'm sure you can come up with little things, but there's obviously nothing that was that big that you're like, yeah, I'm scrapping that idea completely.
Yeah, I think overall I was pretty happy with the results, like I said, but it was just like, it was the secondary goal. Ultimately, I would still say most of the year last year I spent training jiu-jitsu, and I feel really confident with how I've progressed and how like I'm feeling really good with my progression towards getting the next belt, but also like with the skills I've acquired and how comfortable I feel. So like, I don't even feel like running was the thing that I focused on last year. It was just like this little side project.
Makes sense. Did you notice like a notable improvement in your cardio for jiu-jitsu?
I don't know if I noticed like a notable improvement in the cardio specifically, but like I've been able to learn to dial the intensity that I'm able to engage in things at such a greater level thanks to last year's running cycle of training. And that has been the most like the best improvement, the best gift that I've gotten from that training cycle is like learning how to relax, learning how to only give what's in front of me like the right level of intensity and not any more. That's been the biggest improvement for everything. Just like it's such a life skill, right? Not overreacting to things, right? And then you always end up regretting it, right? You just want to play it cool. Same thing applies in jiu-jitsu, and I had to really learn that from running, because I forced myself to run slow. So part of my training was to make sure that I'm trying to stay in the zone 2 cardio, like low intensity state training, where like your heart rate is 140 beats per minute or lower usually. And the first little while, actually, I tried to go so slow while I was running, and my heart rate was well above that. And it's kind of funny to like see how like keep track of your heart rate and be like, is my heart rate really that hard for like doing this? Like this feels like nothing. Like why why is it like that? But it is. And then slowly you see the improvement. It's actually amazing to see, to view that as well, and kind of realize like some of these improvements are so like silent and so like you're just like, how is this possible? But it happens, and you can. I found that there are times that I would run the same 5 kilometers faster with a slower heart rate, average slower heart rate. I was like, wow, this is amazing to see. And the whole time my goal was to run as comfortably as possible, staying in zone 2 where I could, like, if there was somebody with me, I could have a conversation. I never felt like I needed to, like, gasp for air or anything like that.
And that only comes from, like, a very acutely paying attention to those things as well, right? Which is, with a calculated method of training, like, you have to find some way to pay attention and to measure your progress other than just a faster time, because your goal wasn't only to have a faster time, it was also to do without injury. And so it would have been really easy to just, like, run faster. Like, you certainly could have run faster on those training runs, but at what cost to that? And that's where paying attention to, like, some other metrics makes sense. And the strength training analogy is like, yeah, sure, you could have lifted 10 more pounds, but at what cost? What would your recovery have been like? What would your technique have been like? What would your XYZ things have been like, and would that have been worth it or not? And, like, oftentimes it's not worth it, because just lifting heavier or just running faster is not the actual goal.
Yeah, ultimately my ultimate goal was to get really good endurance that I could use for jiu-jitsu, and I methodically made sure that all of my training was geared towards that. Like, running, I don't care. Like, running just happens because there's all these other sports that involve running.
Or involve your heart more so. It's like, I need my heart for other things, and running is a good way to train that thing. So I guess I'll do this stupid running thing so that I can not gas out in 30 seconds in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. But it's been really incredible just to see that transition in myself, to be able to apply myself not just at 100% at all times.
Yeah, and that's a legit skill, and it would be even more valuable in jiu-jitsu than probably, like, a lot of other sports. But I recall even back to when I was playing soccer, it's like soccer, it's not like hockey where you're on and off in 30, 45 seconds, right? You get your rest on the bench. In soccer, like, you're playing the whole time, and while you're not sprinting the whole time, you can't just sit on the field and like wait until you're ready to go again. Like, you have to follow the play and be in position, and, like, you have a job to do even when you're not on the ball. And so we had to get really good at how do you recover while still playing? Like, okay, I just made a 35-yard sprint down the field. I got to get back in position. I don't need to be sprinting at 100%, but I can't walk there. So how do I keep moving and keep playing and keep doing the activity while simultaneously recovering? And that was, I never thought about it that consciously because I was 15 years old, but like I was doing that and being taught how to do that and to do that nonetheless. And it's a hugely important skill and not necessarily an easy one. And again, especially in a combat sport when it's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to, like, be resting, but this person is trying to kill me. So how do I marry these two things? It's not exactly easy.
Yeah, right. It's that fight or flight response. So you have to really fight your nature to relax. But when you do that, the benefits are amazing. Because I used to get this, like, really bad claustrophobic feeling at times when the weight on me was placed, like, so effectively that, it felt like, when your chest expands for breathing, right? I felt like I didn't have room to expand my chest to breathe. And I would get, like, these panic attacks and feel claustrophobic and, tap, like, vigorously to get out of there, even though there was no, like, submission applied. But, like, it's just been able to hone those emotions and put them in and realize that, like, okay, if I relax in this position, then it doesn't feel as bad as if I'm, like, really struggling, and just being able to have a conversation inside your head and tell yourself to calm down.
Yeah. And actually plan your next move rather than just reacting. Like, in the very short time that I did jiu-jitsu, I remember that was also a problem for me. Like, I wasn't very good, obviously, because I just started. So, I suck and I just, like, react. I would just, like, do stuff. And then I remember some of the guys who were, like, higher belts, purple belts would, like, training with them, they would, like, push me back down, and they would tell me, stop. Like, what are you doing? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I'm just like flailing around. They're like, okay, do something. Take a second, look at where we are, and, like, do something now. Don't just flail around. Like, I'm going to beat you anyways, so don't worry about that. Like, kind of like, okay, that's a weird backhanded compliment way to help me, but cool. Like, I'm going to beat you anyways. Like, figure out something to do. Like, make a decision. At least make a decision. Don't just flail around. That's not it's not a viable option here. That's not something we learned in class. We learned this escape or this whatever. Like, do that rather than just react. And it's really hard. It's really, really hard to do.
Yeah, it comes back to that attention and intention. Like, what are you intending to do, and what are you placing your attention on? And, you know, there's so many variables. You could be paying attention to so many different things, and you can only really pay attention to one, at most two things. And it's always worse when it's two, you know, it's like both things kind of suck.
Exactly.
Instead of one being good. So, But should we switch gears and talk a little bit about your goal before we go on?
Yeah, we can talk about my failure of last year.
Well, I think every failure is a step towards success. So let's reframe it that way.
Yeah, fair enough. So what were the words that I used last year? I think I said, it was something to the effect of, I'm trying to be accused of being on steroids or something like that.
Yeah, that was going to be my first question. Did anyone last year accuse you of being on gear?
Yeah, no one did, because I did not even get in better shape at all last year. I improved basically nothing, which really sucks to say.
Did you check how lean you got by any chance with any?
I didn't, but it wasn't leaner at all. And really, what
about
happened,
strength numbers? Did you check strength numbers at the end of the year?
Oh no, it was way less. It was. I went backwards, if anything. But so what happened was, I even when we were talking last year, I was already. So we had this conversation in April of last year, right? And my shoulder was still injured, and I was like a few weeks away from healing that, and then. Right, I don't remember the exact timing, but like very soon after my shoulder was like kind of good to go, I had hurt my back. And I hurt my back for the first time I've never had a back injury before, and, you know, knock on wood, never have a back injury again, but it was the first time I ever hurt my back, and it scared the crap out of me. And so I was like, okay, this is not good. And I was doing an RDL, simple RDL, wasn't any like crazy amount of weight or anything. And because I hadn't been training too much from my shoulder, like my grip was a little weak. The bar kind of slipped in my hand, but it wasn't anything crazy. And I was like, oh, I kind of had a weird tweak feeling when the bar just slipped in my hand. And I was like, oh, that was weird. And then I kind of like, you know, did a little shimmy shake, and, you know, what we were talking about, like, you know, feeling your body. And I was like, all right, that was a weird one, but like, I think I'm okay. Like, I feel strong. I feel sturdy. Like, so I finished the rest of the workout cautiously, but, you know, kept the weight the same and finished the workout. And then I was at home that night, and I was like moving some stuff in the backyard, like nothing, some sticks. It was like nothing. And I just bent over, and I just like fell to the ground instantly. Like my back just scared. I was like, oh fuck, this is like that. And that's what scared me. It's not like it was an obvious, like, okay, if I fall, you know, carrying a couple 100 pounds in the gym, like fine, I can understand that. But like all I did was bend over, and I crumbled to the ground. Anyway, so I aggressively tried to rehab that. Turned out it wasn't actually like a disc thing. It was more of like the rib vertebrae junction, which thankfully for that. But anyways, that took me out for another couple of months. Now, by this time, when I'm like back to being able to just like start training with some relative intensity again, was September. And by this time, I'm like, okay, I'm not hitting my like look like I'm on steroids goal in 4 months here. And so I honestly just like gave up on it. I was like, well, listen, the first thing that I need to do is get healthy, rehab this, get back to where I was. Never mind getting beyond that. It's going to take me a couple months of very cautious training just to get back to what I was, you know, at the beginning of the year. And so that was really the goal. Now, or that's what happened. Now, could I have paid more attention to my diet while being injured to like continue with the leaning out process and keep walking and like lean out while not actually training? Absolutely, I could have. But to your earlier point, I don't think I had a strong why for my goals last year, because it's kind of like very superficial and mostly just like, yeah, I just kind of like want to do this, but I didn't really like. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't have been that upset. I mean, I didn't do it, and I'm not upset. So I didn't have a strong why. And so to continue doing it in the face of those injuries and those challenges was just like, I just don't give a fuck about this really at all. And so I'll just like not do it. Now I didn't gain weight through that. I generally watch my diet and I'm active and whatever anyways. So like it was fine. I didn't gain weight. It's not like I just completely gave up and sat on the couch and ate cookies while my back was getting better. I still trained as much as I could and walked and did some mobility work and did a lot of rehab stuff. But this is a very long-winded way of saying, yeah, I failed my goal. I didn't have a why. The reason why I failed my goal was mostly because I got injured, but then also because I kind of just gave up on the goal. Yeah.
It's interesting. There's levels, right? Like, because you do maybe perhaps have the discipline, even if you don't have the strongest of whys. If you didn't have the obstacle of that injury, then you could have persevered and pushed through and come either, reach your goal or come really close. But, it's not always down to discipline. There's so many factors at play.
I think so as well. I mean, I think my excuses were legit. Like I guess everyone thinks their excuses are legit, but it's not like I didn't have any hurdles and I'm saying like, oh, it was just like, it was hard. I couldn't stop eating dessert or I couldn't, like that. It's not that. Like I could have been disciplined enough to like do the stuff. I've done it before with no why, like the very early days of COVID, like when we were full lockdowns, whatever I trained twice a day, every single day, except for Sundays. I only trained once. For like 4 months in a row. Wow. And I never missed a day, never missed a workout, never went to bed late. I was literally 100% perfect. And there was no real why. I was just like, well, I got nothing else to do.
This is what's available.
Might as well do this. So like, let's just go for it. Like, and I could have easily just been like, nah, fuck it. I'll just like, who cares? But I just did it. So like discipline is not the issue. It was just like, I didn't actually care enough about my goal to continue to pursue it in face of those challenges. And then we also spoke about, hurdles and stuff that would happen. So those injuries were pretty big hurdles that overtook my goal. My goal switched in the year to like, let me just heal these injuries. I need to feel good again. I never, ever, I had this little back thing, scared the crap out of me. And I never, ever, ever want to feel that again. And so my goal switched to let's just get healthy and robust again, and then I'll worry about the whole jacked and shredded thing later. But that is very secondary to me. Totally. And maybe that's also because while I don't think that I'm some Adonis physique competitor, I think my physique is pretty good. I'm pretty confident and happy with it, and I don't have this major drive to be like, oh, I've really got to lose weight or I really got to put on muscle. Like, I'm good. If my body stayed like this for the rest of my life, I'm good. Of course, you want it to be a little bit better, but I'm never going to be upset about the way it is right now. So I didn't have that like big motivator to be like, oh, I really got to get my ass in gear here.
So let's talk about then how you like it. So first of all, like it's amazing to reprioritize your goals. Like you got to be constantly be doing that, right? Like there's always like a list of 3 to 5 things that are important to you, and then there's the deck is always shuffling. There's always a new highest priority. Clearly, having a pain-free life where your back is not twinging and bothering you at all times is way more important than having better physique. And consciously making the decision to reprioritize is, step number 1. So glad you did that. And then, so let's talk about how you went about rehabbing your back. What did you do to help fix it?
The very first thing I did was contact my athletic therapist and made an appointment as soon as I could, because I knew that I was going to try and, get myself going, but I was like, this is not something that I'm going to try and do alone, because this is foreign territory to me from injuries to my body. Like I've injured my knees and ankles and stuff like hundreds of times. Like if I get a little tweak there, I can more or less deal with it on my own if it's not something major. So I messaged her right away, got in with her. But before, like, the day or two before I was able to see her, I knew that I needed to find out what is going to exacerbate this pain and what is going to alleviate the pain. So immediately I started trying different positions. If I bend over like this, if I side bend, if I, spinal extension, if I rotate, if I walk, if I lie down, I tried all the positions. I tried a bunch of different exercises, McGill curl-ups, dead bugs, bird dogs. Like I just tried to do a bunch of different stuff. And I had like a note on my phone of like, this hurt, this made it worse, this felt okay, felt good. Like I just kind of went through a list of what feels good, what doesn't feel good. I noticed that walking actually felt the best. Like when I was in motion, I felt way better than when I was seated. Like seated in a position like I'm seated right now was like the worst thing that I could have been. So laying down flat on my back or walking was good, but I can't like just lay down flat on my back the whole day. So I knew that movement was a key, which was a nice sign. Then when I saw her, she's like, I don't think this is really like a spinal thing. Seems like more of the rib thing. I was like, okay, that's good, but like the rehab is kind of the same, right? A lot of the muscles around it were super tight and spasming because of the injury. And so we had to work on loosening that up. So that was where like a lot of the manual therapy came in, and her just kind of getting in there, and then me doing, mobility work on my own outside of that under her direction as well. But, again, using my own judgment and my own knowledge of training and my own body, like, okay, I need to twist this, extend this, shorten this, lengthen this, whatever it is. And sometimes it's hard to describe this, and you'll appreciate this, John, because like I can't tell you what exercises I did because they don't have names or descriptions. It was like I just moved my body in ways that felt like it made sense. And that's not like I could coach someone to do that if I was with you and I could be like, okay, put your leg here. No, bend it this way. Do that. I could do that. But in like a podcast format or even like an online coaching format, like I can't do it for those things. So it's really hard for like injury stuff that way. But so I can't explain to you what I did. I just like did stuff that made me feel good and made it feel loose and strong. And that was that for like a couple months.
So what I like about that is the combination of passive treatment and active treatment. So the passive treatment from your friend doing manual work on your body and helping with that matter. But the point I want to make is people think that that's all they have to do when they have pain to resolve the issue. And it's just like, that's only half of that's not even the important half. Many people might get away with not needing that half. The second half is what's needed, is the active part from you contributing to do something to improve it. To, like what you said, figure out what is the thing that I need to do that makes sense for making this heal. And that sounds so weird to say, but like you just have to feel how the movement is affecting your body. And by doing it enough times, you'll understand. You'll just know that this is the right thing because I know it's making me feel better, and then you'll heal. It's just how it works. Exactly.
So then from there, and all credit to the athletic therapist that I work with. Her name's Carla. I've talked with her. She's actually been on the podcast a while back. She's phenomenal. Wonderful. And she's very much like active focus. Like, yeah, okay, we'll get in there and dig in and do the manual stuff, but then like, okay, get off the table and like, let's figure out how you're moving and let's optimize this.
Yeah, and do homework when you go home.
Exactly. And so together with her, we're like, okay, let's look at a few movement patterns. What is my squat looking like? What is my hinge looking like? What are these things looking like? And what are little tweaks that I can make that maybe I couldn't feel, but she could see, or like a third party person could see. And maybe if I had been filming myself, I could notice it, kind of thing. And then so work on like, okay, break this movement down into the smallest possible parts and then build it back up from the ground up, build up your squat again. And not necessarily the weight wasn't the issue. It's like the way that I'm moving. So for my squat, for like RDLs and hinges and deadlifts, and even like overhead movement and the way like my shoulders interacting with my ribs and stuff like that. So really just breaking down all those movements and kind of like redefining my movement patterns, if you will. And I know that's kind of like a big term that doesn't really mean anything, but like rewiring the way that I move so that I was a little bit more efficient. And then once that felt good or felt like it was at a point where like, okay, this is how it should be, then continuing to load that up heavier and heavier and getting back into the more of the traditional strength training stuff while keeping more of that mobility and like, prehab work, if you will.
Can you go over the timeline again one more time? Sorry. So it took...
It was like all of that took about like 4 months.
Wow.
So it was like the entirety of the summer. So,
and by the end of the 4 months, you felt like you felt confident in moving your back in a way where you didn't think like anything was going to surprise you.
Correct. Yeah. To even like in October, I went to, so around like middle of September is when I started to feel like, okay, I feel like unrestricted now. Like I could just go in and do anything and it will be fine. I don't need to spend I don't need to do an entire workout of just wiggling my back around.
Yeah.
And then I was going to say in October, I went to Edmonton for a fitness conference, the Evolve fitness conference. And a friend of mine he was there as well, Jeff Dalzell, who's also been on the podcast. We were on the same flight down together and whatever. And as we worked out together and we were doing trap bar deadlifts, and Jeff said we were going light on this day, and he's kind of a savage and loaded up like way too much weight on the trap bar. And I was like, oh, I haven't done this in like a year. But to summarize the point of what I'm saying is like, I felt confident to do that, and I did it, and it was fine. In October, and I had injured myself in like May, June, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Middle of May, I think.
So then what did the rest of the year from October till December look like for you?
Pretty goalless, honestly. It was just like, okay, let's just train again to enjoy training. I didn't really work on a program, kind of just did what I more or less felt like. And to that point, I didn't really make a ton of progress, but I also knew that I wasn't going to make a ton of progress.
You just decided to go on maintenance phase. Was there like anything that you were doing that was like more for the fun part of training rather than the discipline part of training?
I started to add a little bit of cardio in the form of sprints into my training, like a ski erg or the rowing thing or the assault bike. Started to add that in for a little bit of like, I don't want to use the word, but kind of like CrossFit style. Like I would just do a couple sets of something at like a not that heavy, but like kind of heavy, and then like go do a couple sprints in between and then come back to it.
You're a closet CrossFitter.
Yeah, I think I am, honestly. It's horrible to admit, but I think I am. Honestly, and I've said this before, like every kind of group class, like they're all just worse versions of CrossFit. Like if it's just like your booty hit class, it's just like a bad version of CrossFit. That's all it is. But anyways, so I started to add that into the mix a little bit, and I just made sure to continue to focus on like my mobility and stability training through the rest of the year and continued into now, just because that is something that I know that I need to do. I feel so much better when I do it, and I always find excuses to not do it. Like I'll do it, but not do it enough, and not do it with enough intensity and enough regularity. And so it's like I just kind of convince myself like, oh yeah, like I did it, but like I did it 2 weeks ago. Like I gotta be on that more.
Yeah, I find this is my hack for it is now, because I'm just doing a lot of jujitsu and it's so hard on the body. It's like you don't have a choice. You either run yourself to the ground and you feel like crap, or you do mobility to recover yourself from doing jujitsu.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm so injury prone in the past that like every single workout has some element of like mobility or like prep training or something. And so I kind of convince myself that is enough, but it's obviously not enough. And so I need at least one dedicated training day that is purely just that. If not 2 days of training in a week, that is purely just that. And I just need to continue to implement that in my weekly training schedule.
Yeah, there's multiple approaches too. I mean, that sounds pretty reasonable. And then for me personally, I do like little 5-minute things all throughout the day. I try to like, I know I got a few minutes here. Like, it's kind of funny, but I have a island in the kitchen now that I can use to like slide into like front and middle splits.
Hopefully your wife doesn't watch this episode.
That's pretty sturdy, but like I know like I'm frying some food. It's gonna be like whatever 5 minutes before I have to worry about it, so I can just do like a few sliding lunges. Like,
works.
Yeah, like I try to do that as much as possible. My mind is always being like, that's one of the weird thoughts. So people have just weird thoughts that pop into their heads all the time. You can't control it. Just what happens. the weird thoughts that I get is like, you could be doing an exercise right now. This is what you should do. Like, it's so weird. Like, I'll be putting on a sock. Like, you could be doing this single leg balance right now. Just do that instead. Like, okay.
It's a good way to think about it. And honestly, I talk about this, or advise a lot of clients to do things like this. Maybe not, doing that, but things like just having a band, like a red band by your desk, and just do, like, whenever you're on a phone call, or maybe not on a phone call, but whenever you have like a second, whenever you remember it during the day, just do like 20 band pull parts and just accumulate like 500 during the day. Accumulate a lot, like just do them, because it's going to help your posture. It's something to do just to move your body, and call it a micro workout, call it a stretch, call it whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be band pull parts. It could be anything. Just do squats, do push-ups, do any exercise, and just sprinkle it out throughout the day just to get a little bit more movement. And it's a great tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like it aligns with that overall goal you're talking about. Like for you, like you need mobility to basically take care of your body, so that you ultimately you're talking about longevity, right? Like you want to be able to do all these fun things that you enjoy doing now as late into your life as possible. Okay, how are we going to do that? Doing that little bit of that all throughout the day kind of sounds like the right plan for making sure you just keep doing that for the rest of your life. Same as like if you have a dedicated like 1 or 2 hours throughout the week, like that absolutely works as well. But just you got to play around with what is available to you. Yeah,
no, I totally agree. So for me, this upcoming year, like resetting that same goal, and now I do have a little bit more of a why, although I will take a different approach to it. So next year around this time, or close to the time this episode will be coming out, I'll be getting married. And so, getting ready for that. And although, like, again, I'm excited for that. And like, that's a bit of a goal. Like if I got married in the body that I'm in right now, like I'd be good with that. I don't like need to like, lose whatever to get married. Like I'm good. But I want to be in like my best shape ever for that, and I can keep that date in mind. It's set in stone, and it's like I can work towards that. Now, that's still like a 2024 goal, although the wedding is in 2025, because like you've got to be prepared beforehand, suit fitting and all that stuff. So that will be the goal. However, my approach will be like, first of all, right now I have no injuries. So knock on wood. It's January 16th that we're recording this, no injuries, like I'm good. But my number one thing is do not get injured. Do not do anything that is pushing the limits in a stupid way. Like I will push the limits and I will challenge myself, but nothing that's going to risk injury to some significant degree.
To do a callback to our previous podcast, don't do things that are dumb.
Don't do things that are dumb. That's exactly. So last year, I didn't do things that were dumb on purpose, but I did do things that were dumb. This year, I will hopefully not do things that are dumb on purpose, and proactively do things that are smart, so that I don't get injured. But just a bigger focus on mobility and like my physical body health, as well as just all the same stuff of dialing and training, getting as lean as I can, then adding a little bit of muscle, but not too much. Probably
9%
not
is
really
still what you're
muscle.
aiming.
I'll still go for 9% just because I think it's still a nice round number. But like if I'm at 10%, I'll consider it a win still.
Understand?
I'll aim for that 9%, and I've got lots of time now, so there's no reason as of today why I shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, man. Well, huge congratulations on the wedding news. That's great, man.
Thank you.
Very happy for you. As a person who's been married nearly 10 years now, I think you're on the right track with that. Yeah. Fingers crossed. Yeah. That's amazing to have a stronger why now, right? For this, like, obviously, like you said, you're fine with the body you have now, but to really want to look your best for this, like, really important day in your life. Like I can see myself wanting to pursue a goal like that. Like, so definitely that connection with that visceral connection is going to be huge for driving you to, even on the days where you're not feeling your best, or maybe you're like, this could be an injury. You can convince yourself that maybe it's not, and maybe you should just push a little harder that day.
Exactly. And even just having that date on it, whereas last year I didn't have a date. like my timeline was the entire year, but there was no date. There was no real finish line. So this year I have that date to actually like look forward to and plan towards, which will really help. The other thing that will strengthen this on the injury side of things is like, I already have knee issues, and I've had those for a long time, and I've accepted that is part of my life and something that I need to deal with on a minor basis almost every single day. And I'm okay with that. It sucks, but I'm okay with it. I'm not okay with having another thing to add into that mix. Like if I've got to deal with my knees and my back, or my knees and my shoulder, and this is like another thing that I got to like just work on every single day, I'm not okay with that. So working very strongly on preventing that is actually a stronger why than like the date of the wedding coming up. That's a nice tangible thing, but like wanting to do all this stuff for the rest of my life, already dealing with my knees, good. Check that box. Been doing this. This will be 10 years since my surgery this year, and whatever, fine. Not going to do it with the second thing.
Yeah, man. Damn it. Just mind blanked again, but freaking, I hate when that happens, eh?
Yeah, it's the time of day. It's late at night, and it is what it is. But I mean, yeah. So that's my wrap up. So as far as like going after some of the stuff that I was asking you about, like what would I do differently? I mean, like everything I'm going to do differently, because like my whole thing changed last year. So I can't really say like, oh, this worked or this, like nothing worked because I didn't do anything. Like I got injured. Don't do that. That's what I'm not going to do. That's what I'm going to do differently this year. As much as I can control that. So, and if I do, then hey, I'll roll with the punches. I'll do what I can to heal that injury as fast as I can, and maybe this year, because of those other goals, or because of the wedding date and goal, I'll be a little bit more diligent at continuing to lean out even in spite of that injury, and not using that as like who cares, like what's the point of getting lean if I'm injured? Like there will still be a point to getting lean. So, I hope it doesn't come to that, but if it does, I think I'll be able to kind of stick through it that way this year.
Yeah, having that day's nice. Like for me, it was also very nice having a date that I was working towards, and I could use the calendar to work back from and schedule things out that way. So I think you're right. It makes a big difference to have a specific thing to look towards.
Yeah, definitely. What else did you want to talk about in regards to your pursuit for this year for the marathon? I know we're almost an hour and it's getting late. Try and wrap this up for everyone, but
yeah. There's a couple things I want to bring up before we finish. First of all, just going back on some of the things we said the last podcast, I just want to clarify some of them. Let's see. We were talking about. So just talking about running, and I was talking about how like I've been, learning a lot from all these different mentors, learning about how to run. And I was talking about how when I'm running now, I have this like cue that I'm following where I'm doing head over foot. So I'm kind of moving my spine, and as my foot's kind of striking on the ground, I'm moving my head over that side of the foot and then going back and forth. And I kind of used the wrong turn of phrase to describe that when I was running, it's like that I'm zigzagging rather than going straight towards like my object where I'm going. Like my legs are still on the same path to to the target where I'm running to on a straight line. Like, but the way I'm organizing my upper body is I'm organizing it through this change in the structure, so that there's one short side and one long side with the spine. And then there's also this counter rotation of the shoulder and the hips. And through that, like movement, I have found that I like, it seems like the upper body is zigzagging, but it's just reorganizing its structure. The legs are still going in a straight line. So I just wanted to clarify that in case people were like listening to that and thought I was crazy for like saying that you get somewhere faster by zigzagging to it rather than going in a straight line.
I think people who listen to David Weck think he's crazy, but, and he is, but in a good way. And the word that he uses to describe that is that coiling action. I think it's actually a good word to describe what you're trying to say with this upper body zigzagging, because it's not just a lateral motion. It's not just a twist. It's like a coil. It's a twist up. It goes in both directions at the same time and back and forth. And that's what creates the term, the spinal engine. And I'm not sure if he coined that phrase or someone else, but that's
I want to talk about that actually. The term spinal engine comes from this guy, Serge Grakovetsky, who's actually a professor at like Montreal University, I think. Oh. And if you go to his YouTube, just search Serge Grakovetsky. He's got a channel. And if you go to his most popular videos, the top 5 most popular videos, if you watch those videos, you will upgrade your knowledge of the human body to such an extent. It's unbelievable. It's really, really good. So he talks about the spine and how the spine is the primal engine of locomotion, and how the movement of the spine is what propulses us forward, rather than simply like the spine being like the unit being carried by the legs, and the legs being the engine of movement. And he's got very compelling evidence to display that, so I think, having watched that and then making that connection with what David Weck's talking about with head over foot. And then the other thing that I think I mentioned a little bit last time with the rope flow that I've been doing, which is basically like using, it's like a jumping rope that you don't use for jumping. You literally just use it to swing from side to side your body, and it forces you to move your spine in a similar way that how you would be doing it if you were to actually do the run with that coiling action. Yeah, actually another thing that I just want to recommend if people are listening and they want to like understand this a little bit better, just like go to YouTube and search walking without legs, or man walking without legs. And the video you get is this amazing video of a man who's a double leg amputee. So he's got no legs, but he's still got his hip bones, and he's using the sits bones of his hip bones to walk on. And you can see the exact thing that we're talking about, where those hips are counter-rotating, his hips on the ground and his shoulders are counter-rotating to one another. And his spine is undulating, where it's like side bending to one side, creating a short side on one side, long on the other, and then back and forth. And, without legs, this man is walking. So kind of really supporting the idea that the spine is the engine of movement.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, since you mentioned it last time, I've like been peripherally paying attention to these things. Like running has not been something that running specifically has not been something that I've cared about for a long time. So I haven't like dug into it just for that reason, but my own self-interest and exploration into just human movement and all that stuff is, I pay attention and I'm interested in it. It's like, I haven't dove all the way into it, not nearly as deep as you have, but I mean, the logic of everything checks out and seems to make sense. And like going back to playing with your body, the runs that I did last year, and I was like, oh yeah, let me just try what I would think this head over foot thing is. And I was like, oh, this is different. And so my first thought was like, this is different. This is weird. This is not what I'm used to. Mm-hmm. But if I forced myself to do it long enough, I was like, okay, I get how this would, I have enough experience with my body, whereas like, this doesn't feel good right now, but I can understand how this would feel good if I became more efficient at this movement, this form of movement. It feels so bad because I'm doing it so forced right now and it's not good. But like if this was something that I was going to pursue, I would definitely go all the way down this rabbit hole and try and figure it out. So, I mean, to anyone who's like interested in running and just enjoys running, even if you just enjoy it, don't even have like necessarily a goal, just make it more efficient, feel good on your body and all that stuff. It's definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, totally. And just one more resource for people to look into for running, because these were really instrumental for helping me build my run to reach my goal of running the half marathon in 2 hours, is Dr. Matt Menard. He's got a YouTube. He's got an Instagram. It's at learn.to_run. If you search that, he's been really, he's what I would describe as like the mainstream of like running. Like he gives a lot more like basic concepts that I think like every runner should incorporate into their runs. And then David Weck is more like, once you got the basics, then you want to try some wacky stuff. Then you might want to experiment. Exactly. But but with learn.to.run, his page is great for like really making you understand that what you're trying to do as much as possible is glide forward during the run. We talked about this a little bit last time, how like you're trying to minimize how much you're actually hopping up, right? I was trying to describe that maybe perhaps like originally when I read some book that described running as a series of controlled falls, I thought that doesn't seem that true to me. To me, it seemed like more like single leg jumps, but then we were talking about how you actually want to minimize how much you're jumping up and you want to glide forward. And so Dr. Matt Menard was really instrumental in helping me see that and then understand that like we get that through hip extension, but then also from hip extension, when we land on the foot, on the opposite foot, then we're kind of like slowing ourselves down actually. This is the thing that I never thought about running is a run is a series of accelerations and decelerations. You go fast, you slow down. You go fast, you slow down. It's just, that's what you have to do when you're not on wheels, but you're on legs. It's just how it works. So by, realizing that, then I had my mind open to then using my heel when I was running to land on my heel. Prior to this, I was always landing on the forefoot and using my Achilles tendon as a way to bounce myself during the runs. But then I realized, wait, if I'm slowing myself down, if you land on your forefoot, you actually have a stronger deceleration than you do when you land on your heel. Like it's hard to think about when you're running, but it's very obvious when you're just walking. When you're walking, you don't land on your forefoot, you land on your heel, or otherwise, like the way I described it in my post, it's like a weird Elmer Fudd-like walk, like where you're like, you feel like you're hunting. You have to slow your every step down so no one hears. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you can glide much easier when you land on your heel, and you get that gliding action from pushing the ground back with your hip. So basic, running techniques from Dr. Matt Menard, and then advanced ones from, David Weck.
Yeah, the heel striking one threw me for a loop. And only because that's always felt unbelievably uncomfortable for me. And I used to run like that when I was like a kid. And we had a running coach in soccer, and he was a track guy for the successful track athlete here in Canada. You're also in Canada, but he taught us how to run, and he was more like, it was more sprinting kind of stuff, but it was like a lot of hip flexion, knee flexion, get your knee up, get your foot out, toes into the ground, pull the ground away from you, or pull the ground away from, pull the ground away, pull the ground backwards. And so it's still that horizontal plane of motion, but like when you strike your heel into the ground, and this, I've also got this from a lot of the barefoot communities, like when you strike your heel, if you ran barefoot, you wouldn't strike your heel into the ground because it would hurt like hell.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it feels very unnatural, and maybe again it's just because I've always done this, or since I was a kid now. But like if I run, I'm still running not on my tippy toes, but like if it's just a jog, it's still midfoot striking, I would say.
Yeah. So I think it just really depends. There's no ideal. That's like one of the big lessons regarding running that I learned from this training cycle is there's no one right way to run. It's just what's appropriate for your body, and also what's appropriate for the environment in which you're running. Yeah. Those two important things, they're all constantly interrelating to one another and resulting in you perhaps needing to change the strategy of your run. So when I'm talking about heel striking, I'm talking about like a fairly flat ground, or perhaps going uphill. In those two scenarios, the impact you're going to be feeling on your heel is going to be way less than if you're downhill. If you're running downhill, then it's probably a bad idea to land on your heel. It's going to hurt a lot more. So being kind of mindful to adjust that, I think, is an important aspect of it. And then, yes, I agree. If you're barefoot, you don't heel strike, but you're not barefoot. You're wearing shoes, and if they have padding, use it. And then, just again, pay attention to what it's doing to you. One thing I noticed when I was doing the race, there's a long portion of the race where you're running downhill towards the lakeshore. So during that portion, I didn't heel strike at all. I was on my forefoot, midfoot most of the time. And by the end, where I was getting close to the lakeshore, I noticed like I'm feeling a little tightness on my Achilles tendon, probably because I hadn't switched to heel striking at all, and I was really relying on this one way of doing it. Then we got to the lakeshore, it flattened out, and then I kind of switched back to heel striking, and the pain went away. Later on, when I switched back, the pain wasn't there, it wasn't bothering me. So it's just like, it's nice to have multiple things that are tools in your toolbox that you can apply at different times.
Yeah, definitely. And just again, I think a central theme or lesson of this podcast has been like paying attention to your body. Find what ways work to you. Like explore all the options, know what all the options are, and then figure out which one of those works for you under which circumstances, and then use that one.
Yeah. Attention and intention. What is your intention? How do you focus your attention towards it?
Yeah. I love it. Love it, man. Anything else you wanted to go over before we wrap it up?
No, do you want to talk about this is a weird one. I want to talk about David Weck stuff a little bit more. Do you want to?
Sure, go for it. I don't have much to offer because I've only very peripherally paid attention, but go for it.
Yeah, just because we talked about this a little bit last time, and last time my answer was I don't know it well enough to talk intelligently about it, and so maybe just in case there's that one guy who's been following these two podcasts and wants to know, like, is there a follow-up on this? So one thing that technique that I've learned from David Weck is this double down technique with the arms, which kind of I feel like it's pretty integral, because when you're running, you're thinking you're just using your legs, right? But first of all, it's actually you're using your spine and which controls your legs, but also your spine's also attached to your shoulders and your arms. Like, what are you doing with your arms? That's a big question I feel like a lot of people don't have an answer to. Well, that's not true, actually. People say, like, you move your arms like forwards and backwards, but and it makes sense that actually works pretty well. But then there's some nuances that you can work with and play around with and see what works for you. So one thing is this double down pulse that I learned from David Weck. And so the idea of it is that if we define running as like it's different from walking, because at one point in a run as compared to a walk, both feet are off the ground, right? Mm-hmm. So that means at all times when you're running, there's a component of going forward and there's a component of going up and down. Now, like we already said, you want to maximize your muscular effort towards like horizontal proportion. So you're pushing the ground back so that you propel yourself forward. But regardless, there's going to be some amount of up and down movement, right? So what you can do is be more efficient with, or not efficient, but like you can maximize the amount of ground force you're putting into the ground for the bounce up and down with using your hands. And by doing so, by increasing the amount of time you're spending airborne, then the horizontal propulsion you're creating with your legs is going to be amplified that much further. Did you understand that?
So you're kind of, while pumping your arms back and forth, you're also pumping them up and down in conjunction with your step to push yourself into the ground to pop yourself into a longer flight phase.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Wow, you translated that pretty well, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so traditionally we say the arms are moving one forwards and one backwards, right? So what Weck is talking about is during that transition where one is going forwards and one's going backwards, you do a pulse down. So both hands are pulsing down. That's why it's a double down pulse. And then they switch back to then the other one going forward, the other one going backwards, and then
you'd want to time that pulse with the moment that you're striking the ground.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that way you're increasing the total amount of force that's pushing down into the ground, which gives you, like you said, a greater time in the air, which means that the horizontal propulsion that you create with your hip extension has more time to propel you forward.
And that doesn't create an increased like vertical height on the flight?
It does. And that's why you're able to spend more time in the air while you're horizontally, like, because
so is there a loss of efficiency because we're moving more vertically rather than more horizontally, even though the flight is longer? Like there's got to be a balance of that, right?
Well, because the horizontal movement happens from hip extension. As long as you're still able to as efficiently extend your hip and propel yourself forward with the same force, now you just have more time with the same force before you land and restart this.
I see. It doesn't take away from the horizontal. It just adds.
If you do it correctly, right?
Right. It does. Yeah. So it doesn't limit that. It just adds a slight vertical component to it, making the whole flight phase longer. Yeah, that makes sense. Checks out. Probably really difficult to do though.
And it's like for the longer races, it's a lot more subtle. But for sprints, it's amazing. You can watch videos of like 100-meter sprints where like you can actually see them really hammering down as hard as they can. But it's not quite as important to do that for like, half marathon distance.
Right.
Still has an impact like over the long distance though. I really find like like I feel it.
For sure. Over however many thousand steps flight step or running steps, like it would, if it improves efficiency by like 1%, then that's a lot over 10,000, 20,000 steps or whatever it is for half marathon.
Yeah, you can really get into this flow where once you're doing it, it feels effortless. Like you're breathing very easily, you're gliding, and it feels amazing. It feels really effortless. You're like using the natural bouncy qualities of your body.
Yeah, and I would also imagine that some of the top marathon runners or 100-meter sprinters, like they do this without knowing that they do it. And you might, one might make the argument that, oh, sure, they do it now because people like David Weck are talking about this, and so they're consciously doing it. But like, I bet if you looked back, 50 or 100 years, I would be surprised to find that they were doing something like totally different than what these guys are talking about. Because the top performers in the thing, they just find ways to organize their body, and they don't necessarily know how to do that and know how to coach it and explain why they're doing what they're doing and why it's working. But they do it and it works. And so therefore you just kind of like look at that and like, okay, what are they doing? How do we replicate that?
Yeah, reverse engineer it. And totally that guy, Kiptum, I believe his last name is, that just broke the world record for the marathon. There's video of him on like Weck's page of doing both head over foot and double down pulse.
No, there you go. Yeah. And I bet he's not coached by David Weck, is he?
Not that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm not at all surprised. I mean, we see this in movers of all sport where it's like, oh, they do this thing that's like different, and like, why does that work? It's like, okay, well, they don't even know why, but it just works. And then it takes a scientist of some sort to reverse engineer what they're doing and then coach it to all the rest of us, and then we all figure out how to do it, right?
Yeah. The only thing I would say is not necessarily a scientist, but someone with a scientific mind.
Or yeah.
Someone crazy like David Weck, who will like try to find what actually works and like not necessarily fall for some of the credentialism that's going on these days. Do you have a source for that? Do you like recently I had an interaction with somebody and they're like, why do you have I think they were just like, do you have like a degree or something? And I was like, yeah, I actually have a Master of Science, but like that doesn't even matter because like, let's just think about this from first principles.
Yeah. I think this is also in today's age why so much like ancient medicine or old school wisdom was discounted, and it's probably because they used words that are inaccurate. Like if they talk about an energy field or this thing in your body or this, like in punching and you separate the shoulder, it's like you don't actually separate your shoulder. There is not actually this energy field. There's not actually these things, but like they just didn't have better words to describe it, but they were correct in what they were saying. They just didn't have quote unquote science words to describe it. And so people, throw the baby out the bathwater. It's like, oh, this guy's talking about separating your shoulder to throw a punch. It's like, well, okay, this like forget that part. Was everything else he said correct? Yes. Then okay, then just run with it and find a better term for it. That's what that's what the future and continuing education and iterations are for. You don't have to just say that the guy was wrong. He was right for his time.
Yeah, let's just move this forward instead of shutting things down, right?
Yeah, agreed, man. Well, good stuff. I mean, I'm excited for to see your progress this year and to see you crush it, and hopefully I can follow you along in my own way this year. And
yeah, man, you can
that's
crush
that.
it. Get to that 9%. I hope you post a pic. Like we got to see a 9%.
Oh, I will. You know that
Bathroom
I will
mirror
be.
pic.
I will be milking that as much as I can. My followers will finally start to go up. I'll play the Instagram game. So yeah, we'll see.
I got a nice DSLR. Just invite me over. I'll shoot
go.
for free.
There we go. Anything else you want to point people to? Resources? I'll throw the stuff in the show notes. But where can people find you and whatnot?
Yeah, one last thing. I already mentioned like my podcast, my Substack, but this year I'm going to commit to doing live stream classes once a week, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. If you just find my Instagram, I'll have the links there, but it's on my brother's online platform for streaming fitness stuff. It's called Fitnex. So yeah, fitnex.com if people want to check that out.
Awesome. Very cool, man. Very cool. All right. Well, have a great year, everybody. Hopefully this helps you set your goals for this upcoming year, whatever they may be. Hopefully you've been able to take some insights from this and hopefully apply them to yourself. So make sure you are following both John and I as we go about our own goals this year, and cheer us on, ask us questions, do the things, follow, subscribe, share this podcast with anyone you think would find it interesting. And that's that. We appreciate you. See you next time.
Peace.